Mockery filled the courtroom, until the doors opened, SEALs marched in, and silence crushed the laughter. The heavy oak doors of Federal District Court 7 burst open with military precision, and 37 Navy SEALs in full-dress uniforms entered in perfect formation. Their footsteps echoed like thunder across the marble floor as they filled every available seat behind Lieutenant Commander Sarah Angel Morrison, the woman the defense attorney had just finished mocking as just another nurse playing soldier. The laughter that had filled the courtroom seconds earlier died instantly. Judge Harrison's gavel hung motionless in his hand. The jury box fell silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing as she stared at the most decorated special operations warriors in American history, all here to defend a woman the prosecution claimed was lying about her service record. "Your Honor," Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson announced, his voice carrying the authority of 23 years in special operations. "We request permission to present character testimony for Lieutenant Commander Morrison." What the prosecution didn't know was that Sarah Morrison had saved every one of these men's lives, and they had traveled from active combat zones around the world to ensure the truth was finally told. Before we dive into this incredible story of legal warfare, military brotherhood, and the moment when truth overwhelmed deception, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from today. And if you believe that real heroes will always stand for each other when it matters most, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. The case of Morrison versus Department of Veterans Affairs had begun 6 months earlier when Lieutenant Commander Sarah Morrison filed a claim for disability benefits related to injuries sustained during classified special operations missions. What should have been a routine medical evaluation had become a legal nightmare when VA investigators questioned the authenticity of her service record and combat claims. The problem wasn't that Sarah's records were incomplete. It was that they were too classified for normal VA personnel to verify. Her 8 years of service with Joint Special Operations Command's Medical Detachment involved missions so sensitive that most documentation remained sealed in Pentagon vaults, accessible only to personnel with the highest security clearances. Sarah's service record told the story of a combat medic whose capabilities had saved American lives in the most dangerous operational environments. She had completed advanced trauma surgery, combat casualty care, tactical medicine, and specialized training that prepared her to provide medical care while under direct enemy fire. But more importantly, she had served in locations and operations that most VA personnel had never heard of. Her journey to becoming one of the military's most respected combat medics had begun 12 years earlier when she was selected for the Navy's most demanding medical training while simultaneously demonstrating leadership capabilities that impressed seasoned military instructors. Unlike traditional medical career paths that kept medical personnel in protected roles, Sarah had been identified for programs that required medical expertise combined with tactical capabilities. The training she received was conducted at facilities that didn't appear on standard military maps, using scenarios that simulated the most challenging medical situations special operations forces encountered. She learned to perform emergency surgery while under simulated enemy fire, to conduct medical evacuations through hostile territory, and to make life-and-death medical decisions when traditional medical support wasn't available. Her operational deployments had taken her to locations that remained classified years after her service ended. She had provided medical support for special operations missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and other countries where American forces conducted operations that were never publicly acknowledged. The missions she supported included high-value target raids, personnel recovery operations, intelligence gathering missions, and counterterrorism operations that required medical personnel capable of functioning as full team members rather than protected support staff. Her role was to ensure that wounded operators received immediate medical care that could mean the difference between life and death. Her combat record included 43 medical evacuations under direct enemy fire, 67 surgical procedures performed while positions were under attack, and 127 wounded special operations personnel whose lives had been saved by her willingness to provide medical care in environments where traditional medical support would have failed. Her most notable action had occurred in Afghanistan's Helmand province, where a SEAL team had been pinned down by enemy forces for 18 hours with multiple critically wounded personnel who required immediate surgical intervention. Traditional medical evacuation wasn't possible due to the intensity of enemy fire, and the wounded operators would have died waiting for the tactical situation to improve. Sarah had volunteered to move forward under fire to reach the wounded SEALs and provide emergency surgical care at their position. The approach required crossing 600 meters of terrain while under direct observation by enemy snipers, but the alternative was watching wounded Americans die from treatable injuries. Her movement to the pinned-down SEAL position had taken 4 hours of tactical advance under enemy fire, using cover and concealment techniques she had learned during tactical training. Once she reached the wounded operators, she performed emergency surgery while the position continued to receive enemy fire, saving the lives of 5 SEALs who would have died without immediate medical intervention. Doc Morrison, the SEAL team leader, had written in his after-action report, "Saved the lives of my men under conditions where most medical personnel couldn't have operated." Her courage and medical expertise enabled mission success and prevented the loss of American lives. Her reputation within the special operations community had grown through successful missions where her medical expertise had made the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Military leaders began requesting Sarah specifically for operations requiring medical support under the most challenging conditions. But when Sarah filed for disability benefits related to injuries sustained during these operations, VA investigators had questioned whether her claimed service was authentic. The problem was that most of her missions remained classified, and VA personnel lacked the security clearances necessary to verify operations that were documented in sealed Pentagon files. Ms. Morrison, VA investigator David Palmer had said during her initial interview, "Your claimed service record includes operations and locations that aren't documented in standard military databases. Without verification, we can't approve benefits for service that we can't confirm occurred." Sarah's response had been professional but frustrated. "Sir, my service record is classified above your security clearance level. The operations I participated in remain sensitive, and documentation is secured in files that require special access." Palmer's reply had revealed the bureaucratic thinking that would eventually lead to federal court. "Ms. Morrison, if service can't be verified through normal channels, then for benefits purposes, it didn't occur. We can't approve claims based on classified information that we can't review." The VA's decision to deny Sarah's claim had been based on their inability to verify operations that remained classified years after they occurred. In their determination, if documentation wasn't available through normal bureaucratic channels, then the service must not have happened as claimed. Sarah's appeal of the VA decision had been handled by attorney Marcus Webb, a veterans' rights lawyer who specialized in cases involving classified military service. Webb understood that Sarah's case represented a broader problem affecting veterans whose service involved operations that remained classified long after their military careers ended. "Sarah," Webb had explained during their initial consultation, "your case is complicated because the very nature of your service makes verification difficult through normal legal processes. We'll need to find ways to substantiate your claims without compromising operational security." The preparation for Sarah's case had required coordinating with Pentagon officials, military legal specialists, and veterans advocacy organizations that understood the unique challenges facing veterans of classified operations. Webb's research revealed that Sarah's situation wasn't unusual. Many special operations veterans faced similar problems when trying to access benefits for service that remained classified. But the prosecution's approach to Sarah's case had been aggressive and dismissive. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Collins had argued that Sarah's claims were exaggerated and that her actual service had been routine medical support that didn't justify the disability benefits she was seeking. "Your Honor," Collins had argued during opening statements, "the plaintiff claims to have participated in operations that sound more like Hollywood fiction than actual military service. Her alleged heroics under fire and classified missions are convenient excuses for a lack of documentation." Collins's strategy was to portray Sarah as an ordinary military nurse who was exaggerating her service record to obtain benefits she didn't deserve. The prosecution argued that if Sarah's claimed service was genuine, there would be documentation available through normal military channels. The defense's challenge was to substantiate Sarah's service without compromising ongoing operations or revealing information that remained classified. Webb's strategy was to focus on the impact of her service rather than specific operational details, using character witnesses and medical evidence to support her claims. The trial had begun 3 days earlier with testimony from medical experts, military historians, and bureaucratic officials who explained the documentation challenges surrounding classified military operations. But the prosecution's cross-examination had been brutal, questioning every aspect of Sarah's claimed service. Collins had been particularly aggressive in her questioning, treating Sarah's testimony with open skepticism and suggesting that her claimed combat experience was fabricated. The prosecution's approach had created an atmosphere in the courtroom where Sarah's credibility was constantly under attack. "Ms. Morrison," Collins had said during cross-examination, "you claim to have performed surgery while under enemy fire. Isn't it true that military medical personnel are kept away from combat situations precisely to avoid the scenarios you're describing?" Sarah's response had been professional but clearly frustrated. "Ma'am, special operations medical support requires medical personnel who can function in combat environments. Traditional medical evacuation isn't always available during classified operations." But Collins had continued her aggressive approach. "Ms. Morrison, without documentation that we can review, these claims sound more like fantasy than military service. How do we know these alleged heroics actually occurred?" The prosecution's strategy had been effective in creating doubt about Sarah's credibility. Without access to classified documentation, the defense had struggled to provide concrete evidence supporting her claims of combat service and medical heroics. The courtroom atmosphere had become increasingly hostile toward Sarah as the prosecution portrayed her as someone trying to defraud the government by exaggerating routine military service. Spectators in the courtroom had begun to view her claims with obvious skepticism. That's when Collins made the comment that would change everything in the courtroom. "Your Honor," Collins had said with obvious disdain, "the plaintiff wants us to believe that she's some kind of military hero when she's really just another nurse who's trying to play soldier for financial gain. Her alleged combat record is pure fiction designed to obtain benefits she hasn't earned." The mockery in Collins's voice had been unmistakable, and several spectators in the courtroom had actually laughed at her characterization of Sarah as just another nurse playing soldier. The prosecution seemed confident that they had successfully discredited Sarah's claims. That's when the courtroom doors opened. The entrance of 37 Navy SEALs in full-dress uniforms was like a military parade entering a civilian space. Their synchronized movement, perfect military bearing, and obvious combat experience transformed the atmosphere in the courtroom instantly. These weren't ordinary military personnel. They were members of SEAL Team 6, SEAL Team 2, SEAL Team 8, and other special operations units whose existence was barely acknowledged by official sources. Their uniform ribbons told stories of combat operations in every major conflict of the past decade. Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson, whose 23 years in special operations had taken him to every classified battlefield where American forces operated, approached the bench with the confidence of someone accustomed to briefing senior military commanders. "Your Honor," Jackson said, his voice carrying the authority earned through decades of the most dangerous military operations, "we request permission to provide character testimony for Lieutenant Commander Morrison." Judge Harrison, whose 30 years on the federal bench had never included anything like what he was witnessing, granted permission for the SEALs to testify about their experiences with Sarah during classified operations. What followed was testimony that revealed the true scope of Sarah's service and the impact she had made on some of America's most elite warriors. Senior Chief Petty Officer Martinez was the first to testify. "Your Honor, Lieutenant Commander Morrison saved my life in Afghanistan when I was wounded during a high-value target raid. She performed surgery while our position was under direct attack, and her medical expertise enabled mission success." Chief Petty Officer Thompson followed. "Sir, Doc Morrison pulled me out of a burning building in Iraq after an IED explosion. She provided medical care while under enemy fire and evacuated me to safety when traditional medical support wasn't available." Petty Officer Davis testified about Sarah's actions in Syria. "Your Honor, Lieutenant Commander Morrison treated 6 wounded team members during a 48-hour operation where we were surrounded by enemy forces. Her medical skills kept us alive until extraction was possible. One by one, the SEALs provided testimony that painted a picture of Sarah's service that was far more impressive than anything the prosecution had acknowledged. These were men whose combat experience was legendary within the special operations community, and they were testifying that Sarah had saved their lives. Master Chief Jackson's testimony was the most powerful. Your Honor, Lieutenant Commander Morrison has served alongside Special Operations Forces in more combat operations than most people have security clearance to know about. She's not just a nurse. She's one of the most decorated combat medical officers in military history. The impact on the courtroom was immediate and profound. The prosecution's characterization of Sarah as an ordinary nurse seeking fraudulent benefits was being demolished by testimony from men whose credibility was unquestionable. Assistant U.S. Attorney Collins attempted to challenge the SEAL's testimony, but her questions were met with detailed accounts of classified operations that she lacked the clearance to understand. The warriors who had fought alongside Sarah provided testimony that confirmed every aspect of her claimed service record. Objection, Your Honor, Collins said desperately. This testimony involves classified information that can't be verified through normal legal processes. Judge Harrison's response reflected his understanding that the case had moved beyond normal legal procedures. Counselor, these witnesses have provided testimony under oath about their personal experiences with the plaintiff. Their credibility appears unquestionable. The jury's reaction to the SEAL's testimony was obvious and immediate. The doubt that the prosecution had created about Sarah's credibility was being replaced by growing respect for her service and anger toward the VA's treatment of a combat veteran. The defense rested its case after the SEAL's testimony, understanding that no additional evidence was necessary to prove Sarah's service record and her entitlement to the benefits she was seeking. Collins's closing argument was a desperate attempt to minimize the impact of testimony that had completely undermined the prosecution's case. Your Honor, while we respect the service of these military personnel, the legal standard for benefits approval requires documentation that can be verified through established procedures. But Webb's closing argument focused on the human cost of bureaucratic indifference to veterans of classified operations. Your Honor, Lieutenant Commander Morrison risked her life repeatedly to save American warriors who are here today because of her courage and medical expertise. The VA's denial of her benefits represents institutional failure to support veterans whose service was too classified for normal verification. Judge Harrison's decision was announced immediately after closing arguments. This court finds that Lieutenant Commander Morrison's service record has been substantiated by credible testimony from military personnel whose own service records are beyond question. The VA's denial of benefits is overturned, and full disability compensation is awarded. But the judge's comments went beyond the legal decision. This court is troubled by the VA's treatment of a combat veteran whose service has been confirmed by some of America's most decorated military personnel. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's case highlights systemic problems in how our government treats veterans of classified operations. The victory in court was significant not just for Sarah, but for the broader community of special operations veterans who faced similar challenges when seeking benefits for classified service. Webb immediately began working on additional cases involving veterans whose service remained too classified for normal VA verification. Sarah's case became a precedent that changed how VA claims involving classified service were processed. New procedures were developed that allowed veterans to substantiate classified service without compromising operational security, and liaison programs were established with Pentagon offices that could verify classified operations. The SEALs who had traveled from around the world to testify for Sarah remained in contact with her, maintaining the bonds forged through shared combat experience. Their willingness to risk their own operational security to defend her demonstrated the loyalty that characterizes special operations brotherhood. Years later, Sarah's case was studied in military law schools and veterans advocacy programs as an example of how legal institutions could adapt to support veterans whose service involved operations that remained classified. Her victory had opened doors for other veterans facing similar bureaucratic challenges. But perhaps the most important impact of Sarah's case was the reminder it provided about the true nature of military service and sacrifice. The men who had testified for her represented thousands of special operations personnel whose lives had been saved by medical professionals willing to risk everything to provide care under impossible conditions. The moment when the SEALs entered the courtroom had lasted only minutes, but its impact continued for years, changing how classified service was recognized and ensuring that veterans like Sarah received the support they had earned through their courage and sacrifice. Her story became a permanent reminder that behind every successful special operations mission are support professionals whose contributions often remain hidden from public recognition but are never forgotten by the warriors whose lives they saved. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever witnessed a moment when truth and loyalty overcame bureaucracy and skepticism? Have you seen professionals stand up for each other when it mattered most, regardless of personal cost? Tell us in the comments about times when you witnessed people supporting each other against institutional indifference or when truth finally overcame systematic doubt. And if you believe that real heroes always stand for each other when justice is on the line, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that true brotherhood and professional loyalty transcend bureaucratic obstacles, and that the most important victories are often won not on battlefields, but in places where truth confronts institutional indifference. We'll see you in the next story where we'll discover another incredible tale of courage, loyalty, and the moment when heroes stood together against injustice.